All right. Hey, welcome to tonight's uh, broadcast. This is DestinationFreedom.org. It's very exciting to be here tonight. Um, you guys let me know how many people are logging in and showing up on our live broadcast on both. I guess we're both on YouTube and on Facebook. So that's exciting. And I have we're at Halloween here. I've got my Minuteman hat on. Oh, I don't have a place to put him now. I'll just put that off to the side here. There you go. That's good. And we're looking forward to an exciting time tonight. Hopefully, it'll be inspiring, or we can have you consider some things that maybe you hadn't considered before. Um, the um, the topic of tonight is um, jury nullification, or what I would call the fully informed jury. There is a website called I believe it's .org, or FIJA, FIJA .org. I don't think it's .com, but you can look it up. Check either one of those. It's about jury instruction. We're going to talk a little bit about that. And then the other thing that I want to talk about is the constitutional sheriff. And both of these, in my opinion, are intrinsic to the freedom movement. So if there was any concept that should be unifying with respect to the freedom movement, it would be those two things, which are jury nullification. I'm going to talk a little bit about that, but jury instruction and the constitutional sheriff. So that's exciting for us to know and to apply and implement. So years ago, when I started becoming aware of the freedom movement in New Hampshire, the freedom movement, when you talk about that, whether it being in New Hampshire or anywhere on the planet, is it's vast. What are we talking about? Nowadays, health freedom is a category of freedom that is important. Second Amendment, or the right to defend yourself against overreaching government, if you will. That's really what we're talking about. To defend yourself against criminals, that's general, but whether those criminals, as Jefferson says, he talks about that. I don't know what his quote is, but there are criminals. They're not, the relationship you have with the criminal is they know they're a criminal. They're not pretending to be your friend. They're wanting to steal from you, harm you, or whatever. And then there's you defending yourself against that. When you have an elected representative, or you have a government that's instituted among the people, and they're violating you, they're pretending to be your advocate or your representative, and they're harming you. That's worse than the criminal. But I digress. Anyway, but there's other types of freedoms. Certainly when we talk about health, you could be your how about property rights, your own property, freedoms associated with that. Certainly the fruit of your labor, or what we talk about is the field I'm in is taxes, and certainly the income tax, and whether you have liabilities for that or not. So there's a multifaceted areas of freedom that anybody can participate in. Over the years, I've always said that at least 75% or more of your time should be wrapped up in your pursuit of happiness, not dealing with government or anything, just living your joy and being happy. That should be the majority of your life. I am of the opinion that your work, unless it's your joy, should only be a small part of what finances the kind of life that is your joy and the life that you want to live. Okay. So that's 75%. Then there's the 25% or less. And I think of that in the area of securing your rights, uh, making sure that you can pursue your pursuit of happiness, whatever. A portion of your life is required to secure the rights of others in your community. I don't know what percentage, a very small percentage, but some of it should be helping your neighbors stay free. It's a certain level of maturity, that you're saying, I recognize my rights. I want to be free. I don't want to let government violate me on any capacity. But it's more mature to be saying, I feel compelled to make sure my neighbor's rights aren't violated. That's a big deal. That's a bigger deal than even your own rights. And what a community you'd build when the rest of your community is concerned that your own rights, that your rights aren't being violated. What love and what awesomeness is about that, making sure that your neighbor isn't, his rights or her rights aren't being violated. And so when you think about that, I think about the juror being called to jury duty. And this is such an important duty. And I want to just talk about it in general. It how it is with respect to state, citizen, and jury and all that stuff. We help our clients deal with that because on those jury forms, you're also asked, are you U.S. citizen? And of course, in New Hampshire, not of course, but in New Hampshire, the court determines the qualification for jury duty to be only for a 14th Amendment federal citizen. I have a duty, a responsibility to present that information to the legislature to let them know that the court here in New Hampshire has violated my duty to be called and to sit on a jury. I was called before when I found some of this out, and the court excused me, which they didn't have authority to do because I was not qualified yet as a juror. But the court eventually told me, I have it in writing, that they determine U.S. citizen by the 14th Amendment. I'm not a 14th Amendment citizen. I'm a citizen of my state, and that is New Hampshire. So that's a secondary issue with respect to what I'm talking about, jury duty. Now, one of the provisions in common law, and if you look at the history of jury duty or being on a jury, there's a certain psychological operation associated with juries. I want to talk about that in the history of it. And but the responsibility is amazing. And as freedom people, I just want to encourage you that that you strive to be on a jury. Embrace that duty. Now, when I say that duty, it's a responsibility to be on a jury. Why? Because every single jury needs to have a freedom-minded person on the jury. Why is that? Because if you look up the history of jurors, the juror has the responsibility to judge the case and the law. Some matters that juries are handling are between two parties in some capacity. That's one matter. And so two parties may have an issue with each other and it be determined by a jury. Many times, I don't know about most, but many times, I'm making up that it's most of the time, the one party is the government. It could be the state government, the town government, whatever. And then there's the federal government. When the individual is being harmed or being pursued by the government, then the juror, every juror, has a responsibility not only to judge the case, but to judge whether the law that the state is saying that the individual violated is just or doesn't violate anyone's rights. We call that jury nullification. So you can see a law is passed by the legislature, all of them, signed off by the governor or the president or whatever that may be, and one juror, listen carefully what I'm going to say, one juror has the authority to find the individual not guilty or to acquit them of something because they determine the law violates their rights. Or even if that's not the way you feel about it, just that the law is bad. Every one juror has that power. Even if the judge says this, that, or the other thing, the judge is in a case where there's a jury, the judge is not judging that case. The jury is. Now, these days, judges don't want to tell the jury that they have the right and the power to judge the law and to what they call that jury nullification. Now, if you're going to get on a jury, listen carefully what I'm going to say. If you're looking to be on a jury, the words jury nullification should never come out of your mouth. If any of these, the judge, any of the parties believe or know that you intend to judge the law, they're not going to want you on that jury. So keep your mouth shut and just get on the jury. That's the purpose of it, okay? And yes, they'll a lot of times will say, you have the obligation to judge this matter and uphold the law. I'm going to tell you right now, you have no such obligation to uphold the law. You're judging the law. Law enforcement may have an obligation to uphold the law. The court, the judge may have an obligation to uphold a law. Juries have no such obligation. They take no such oath. If the law is just, uphold it. If the law doesn't violate rights, uphold it. But when I get my hat back on. No, when we're in a studio, there's a lot of noise in the studio. So when a jury, when a juror is judging the case, they absolutely have that power. And what I was going to get to was that the judges may call for a mistrial. Listen to this. This is amazing. Call for a mistrial when a jury is hung. What's a hung jury? When one juror holds out and will not prosecute or find someone guilty, and they're sitting there wanting to acquit, that's a hung jury. Let's say it's the other way around. Let's say all the jurors want to acquit, okay? And they all of them, they want to acquit. And you're the one that says, no, guilty. That's a hung jury where one jury, could be a couple, but where the jury won't come together, you know? So, and I can't think off the top of my head. I believe juries have to be unanimous. That's powerful. I don't know that a jury is, that it's the majority. I didn't check that. I'll know that after we get off this. I'll look it up. I believe they have to be unanimous, which is powerful. The fact that a jury has to be unanimous tells you that one juror can turn the tide. Now, if you want to see how that looks, you can watch that the film is called 12 Angry Men. It's an old film. It's worth watching. It's an early one with Jack Klugman. It has I think it's Henry Fonda or Glenn Ford. I can't remember. I want to say it's Glenn Ford, but maybe it's Henry Fonda. I don't remember. I don't think it's Jimmy Stewart, but is this related to the jury? Anything else? Is this for states, stuff like that? I don't know what this is, so I need to find out what it is, if it's pertained to our subject matter, or it's, anyway. I was getting questions. I want to make sure they're relevant. So anyway, it's important for you to do that. Now, you can look up on the FIJA website and look up about the power of juries. You can look up the history of it. What I was going to say about the history is juries were securing the Bill of Rights. What does that mean? Before there was a Bill of Rights. They put those together because they knew about jury history and about what jurors had done. If you want to find a little bit about juries and how you can look up, I believe it's Penn, William Penn. And now here's the psyop I was talking about, juries. Years ago in the history of juries, the king would convene the people to sit in on a case. All right. Now the king wanted the jury to rule in a certain way. And when they would sequester the jury, nowadays they put them up in hotels because the case is going on long. But what happened in the old days was they'd lock them into the dungeon, limited. They would be putting pressure on the juries so that it would come up with a certain outcome. But if the juries supported the people, then the juries would take it on the chin and would suffer holding out to not to prosecute somebody because the king was unjust. And the reason that was because if the juries found the defendant guilty, then it was their own peers that were prosecuting and it was the clean king that was not allowing it. So yeah, so we'll do that later on. That's good. So the idea was look at how the king can be just because it was their own peers prosecuting them. That's how some of the history of juries were. So juries would stand for the rights of the people. What would that look like? Some of that would be the right to be secure in your home and with your papers, and that a government couldn't come in and illegally search your home. That was a place for privacy and all that. The Fifth Amendment of being a witness against yourself, or the right to conscience, to worship a God according to the dictates of your heart. First Amendment, that religious freedom was secured by juries long before we had a First Amendment. So all of the Bill of Rights were born out of juries already ruling in those matters. So in the freedom movement, if you're part of a freedom organization, your freedom organization should absolutely take it upon their responsibility to help educate the public so that they understand what rights are and how to protect the rights of the people over whatever government intrusion there is. Okay? That's an important thing. Now, a lot of jury instruction happens right at the courtroom, to where they're handing out paperwork in a particular court case. And that may be happening, but courts can charge those people with jury tampering. So the best is not necessarily to have jury instruction going on at the court. That's late. Before the courts, juries are picked out of two bodies of people, different maybe from state to state, but it's usually driver's license and usually the voter registration. And so those are two areas. If you want to do jury instruction, stand out in front of the DMV and hand out jury notification things. I thought I had, here you go. Let me get it here. You can order this book. Let me see. It's called, can you see that, Michael? Yeah. The Citizens Rule Book. These are available online. You can buy them by the dozens or whatever. These are great things to hand out. And then, of course, FIJA has their own. Let me see if I have one here. I don't see a pamphlet from, yeah, I think this is FIJA. Let me see. Thank you. here is a a pamphlet comes out called "True or False: uh, Factual Information About Jury Service." It's another pamphlet. Now, so these are things you can order online, and it's going to be talking about jury nullification. So you can hand these things out, and informs the jury. And the most important thing that we're talking about is to understand that you're judging the law. You're determining whether a law is just or not. There was a state, it could be Arkansas, Mississippi, whatever it is, where the local community felt that the cannabis laws or the drug laws, I think it had to do with marijuana, and they were trying to prosecute somebody for, I think it was cannabis related, all right? And no, they tried this a number of times. They couldn't get a jury to convict somebody in that area. Nobody, there was, at least somebody was saying, no, not going to convict on that kind of a thing. They couldn't get it. They had to the state had to pull out and withdraw the charges because they couldn't find a jury to convict somebody on that law. So we're always trying to influence the legislature, get good people in there, all that stuff. Listen, that's when you're voting for a representative, only vote for a representative that you know is going to secure rights. It's not proper for you to be babysitting your representative as if you don't know how they're going to vote. You should only support, and you should find someone to represent you, whether that be the sheriff or a representative in your state, your town, your county, or, of course, me. I'm not an advocate of voting for people in, me, in the federal zone. I've drained the swamp in my own life. I'm not, there are plenty of good people. You cannot, listen carefully, you cannot send somebody to Washington, D.C., unless it's Jesus, and he'll have to have a whip. But anyway, thank you. And so you can't send someone to D.C. to clean it up, okay? You can't use soap and water to clean up gangrene. It's already passed. You got to cut out the offending organ. It's too much. That's why I'm, this election, I will not be sending anyone to the District of Pedophiles, District of Columbia. That's what I meant to say. Anyway, so I'm not sending anyone back to, I don't support the union. I am I'm a states' rights guy. I am make America states again. The states are enough corruption. They're enough decentralized. I'll go back, if we're going to have a union, I'll go back to the Articles of Confederation and decentralize and disempower the central union government. Okay, that's where I'm at. You know me. So, so anyway, getting back to this, the idea of juries is that this is the end game, the end around. So if you can't find someone good in the legislature, if the legislature's not supporting securing of rights, the juror will intercept anything bad coming down the pike. You don't need 12 people on a jury, you need one. So the work at hand is to educate your local area so much that at least one person will get on the jury, checking or nullifying bad law. That's jury nullification. And I personally believe every freedom organization, some part of it should finance, man, or whatever, but help secure liberty and freedom by the jury. So that's, in my opinion, a matter that should be unified in the freedom movement. Everybody can get on board with that, okay? Especially when we're checking government. And the other one is the constitutional sheriff. What does that look like? Now, Sheriff Mack is well known. You can look up Sheriff Mack. He's written books, and on the matter of a constitutional sheriff. When I lived in Carroll County in New Hampshire, we had an awesome constitutional sheriff. Um, Chris Connolly was awesome. I remember a time when I was dealing with a friend and a client and a friend, and we were dealing with IRS, and they were trying to subpoena um, my friend into um, IRS court. Well, we noticed one of the things you notice about IRS subpoenas is they're never signed by a clerk or a judge. They're improper, as they say. And so, if you look up in your state law, a proper subpoena has to be signed by a judge or a clerk at least in any kind of matter in the state for it to be a proper subpoena. And so we noticed that the subpoenas were not signed at all. What was interesting is that the marshal who was delivering the subpoena, he didn't notice that they had no signatures on them. So we brought this matter to the sheriff, and of course, the sheriff cares about the rule of law in the state, and so he took an oath to uphold the Constitution, such as that. And we showed him that these subpoenas had no signatures on them. So I remember a time where the marshal was making an arrangement to deliver the subpoena to my friend, and so we agreed to meet in the sheriff's office to deliver the subpoena. So the marshal came down, and we were in a hallway, a corridor, or wherever it is, and the marshal comes in, he's got the subpoena, and the sheriff is to my right. Now I'm open carrying, and another friend we had here, he was open carrying. The sheriff was carrying a firearm, and the marshal was carrying a firearm. Everybody's carrying, and this is an exciting moment. And the marshal's going to hand the subpoena to my friend. He's standing there. He doesn't have his hand out. So I go over. I go to look at the subpoena. I said, Sheriff, take a look. Here's the subpoena. If you notice, it has no signatures on it. And so I take the subpoena. Or no, I didn't take the subpoena. So my friend decided he wasn't going to take it. It was an improper one. And the marshal's standing there with the subpoena in his hand. He didn't take it. And so the marshal took it, and he said, he walked away. And we're standing there. He makes a phone call to his office, and they tell him to lay the subpoena down at his feet. So the marshal lays the subpoena down at his feet. We're all standing there. We're like, okay, that's fine. That's it. So the sheriff goes over, and he picks up the subpoena. He looks at it again, and he takes the subpoena. And what he did was he wrote a letter to the court, and he returned the subpoena to the court and said, this subpoena is improper. I will not allow this in my county. This has to be amended in a way that someone is responsible for this, or whatever he wrote. I think I have a copy of that letter. It was powerful. So that's what happened. Later on, we talked to the marshal. He told us he did not realize all these years he's been doing subpoenas that have not been signed. He eventually resigned. I believe he resigned after this. And we've noticed, I'm aware of other IRS people that resign after they realize that they've been violating people. So as the matter progressed, we were trying to figure out what he did. Eventually, my friend decided to agree to go to court as a special appearance, challenging jurisdiction, and we went in. And anyway, the IRS ended up withdrawing, and they ended up sealing that case. Anyway, so that was an exciting time. But you could see that the constitutional sheriff was making sure that that the federal government wasn't going to violate people's rights in that county. So when you're talking about a constitutional sheriff, you're talking about a sheriff that, first of all, at least knows or understands, or at least would reference the Constitution. We're talking the federal Constitution as well as the state Constitution. So what I always say to our clients is that if you have a town selectman or a public official in your town, your city, you should make it a point to go meet with them, to introduce yourself, find out if they're freedom minded. You can ask them a question kind of like this: what do you feel the number one rights violations going on in this town, in this county, in the state, in America, in our union? That's a great question. And then listen to what they have to say. And the follow up question is, and what are you doing about it? So, whenever I've moved to a county or whatever, I've always reached out and I have met with the sheriff um, and my elected reps. You should have your elected reps. Now, whether you agree, whether they're Democrat, Republican, whatever it is, you still should have the names and the contact information in your cell of anyone who's volunteering to be your representative. They should know you. The most important thing is that they should know you. And of course, I believe it's important for you to know them. You should know them whether they're freedom minded or whether they're not. There's no Democrat, Republican in any of these matters. It's always about, do they support liberty and freedom or the rights of the people, or are they empowering the state, the government? It's the only matter ever in every bill, all the time, without exception. Period. If the rep doesn't know what rights are or doesn't care about rights, then your number one job is you have a duty to yourself and your neighbors to find someone, either it's you or you find someone who understands that they're there only to secure rights. Now, there are plenty of anarchist people that I know and that we associate with that believe that there should be no government. I don't support that mindset. Why? Because as the Declaration of Independence says, it says, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. They're endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just power of the consent of the governed. That's a paraphrase, but that's the idea of that. The only purpose of government, listen carefully what I'm saying, the only purpose of government is to secure rights. That's the only government I want, is to secure rights. I don't want my government, dealing with business. None of their business. That means there's no corporations. I don't want my government handling my health. None of it. They don't get to support it or to promote or inhibit my health. It's my responsibility to find that out. Right now, I don't want my government dealing with a lot of areas of my life. I don't want my government in the charity business. That's for local organizations and churches. No purpose for that. Only to secure rights. Period. Got to know what rights are. And if you think health care is a right, you don't understand what rights are. You being healthy is your responsibility. Okay? You have a right to care for your own health. Just like you have a right to make sure yourself is secure. That's why you have a right to keep and bear armaments. It's got nothing to do with guns. It has to do with armaments. Yeah, listen, when they get the proper laser beams that need nothing but can immediately shoot, you'll always hit your target, guns will be obsolete. Technology should take care of that. You're going to want like a phaser, the little small one that Captain Kirk had, or the photon phaser, the one that was like both those phasers would be much better than a stinking firearm long term. Anyway, the idea is that government is there only to secure rights, and there is no other. The amazing thing about America is we have two constitutions, one of your state, one of the federal. Both should be securing rights. And if one government is violating your rights, the other government should step up and say, no deal. But that's not happening in America. It's rare. So anyway, back to the sheriff. So the idea of the sheriff, so when I talk to the sheriff when they're running for office or whatever, I would go up to him and say, listen, what's the number one rights violation going on in the county? And one sheriff, most of the time they don't know what rights are. The one sheriff says, what do you mean? Are you talking about, law enforcement harming people? I'm like, I don't know. Is that what you're saying? Is that law enforcement's violating people? Now, look, if the sheriff cares about rights and not violating anyone, then at least his deputies should make sure that shouldn't happen. And it is the sheriff's responsibility to make sure local municipal cops aren't violating people. The sheriff and his deputies, which are the highest form, um, they're the only law enforcement representative that's elected. Now, hand in hand with the sheriff on some level. The governor has state troopers at his disposal or her disposal. So they're at the top of state troopers, but again, that's municipal. And so the sheriff is even superior to that. The idea is, and some states, and I heard the other day, I hadn't checked this out. Someone told me that there were no more sheriffs in Connecticut. I find that hard to believe, but I'll have to check it out. But if there's a county, there should be a sheriff, and that's old form of law is sheriff. Interestingly enough, is when you noticed, again, look at history, or you can look at the old westerns, right? Out west, when there were territories, there were U.S. territories. In U.S. territories, it was the marshal that was the high law enforcement in the territories. But once they became states and they had counties, it was the sheriff. So that's that's the nature of those two entities. One's federal, and the other is county. Now the sheriff has the authority to uphold the law in the whole state, and of course he has his county. That's where he's out of. But he has that authority to uphold law. It's an amazing power. If your sheriff doesn't know what a constitutional sheriff is, then replace him or give him an education. Let him take classes by Sheriff Mack. There is an amazing book, I want to say that it's called Constitutional Homeland Security. I want to say it's by Vieira. Anyway, the sheriff is an amazing entity because the sheriff can form deputies or committees of safety in every town in his county. Now, in New Hampshire, we only have 10 counties. In the freedom movement in New Hampshire, if we can't win one election in every county by having a constitutional sheriff, that's only 10 people among our 1,300,000 people. That's a small number of people. There should be freedom-minded people in every county. That's someone who's willing to be the constitutional sheriff. One of the projects I wanted to do among all the other projects that I want to do, and that is interviewing every law enforcement entity in the state. Not so much the federal, but state, county, town, and all that. And if we interviewed each one, we might be able to find that great cop who cares about liberty and freedom and let them run for sheriff. And listen, you don't have to be a cop. Now, because the sheriff, first of all, is an administrative position. The sheriff doesn't have to be in the actual duties of law enforcement the way that the deputies are. It's an administrator. They can, and many times they do, but they don't have to be. An anecdotal idea was, if you noticed, Sheriff Taylor from maybe RFD or the Andy Griffith Show, Sheriff Taylor never wore a firearm. He was a sheriff. He always, talks his way. Of course, don't forget that his deputy, Barney, he always had a firearm. Of course, he only had one bullet. And the reason he only had one bullet was because these weapons are registered with the FBI as lethal. He had his judo moves or whatever. That was how he, secured law and order. Barney. Anyway, great show. But anyway, the idea is that the sheriff has the power to deputize anyone he wants. So imagine if you had a volunteer troop or a group of people in a town that came forward. These are people, and that the sheriff would take it on himself is to train them in actions of safety, public safety. Maybe there'd be a flood. He'd call upon these deputies to come out and do public safety things in times of emergency. And of course, to secure the rights of the people, that would be an emergency too. If every town had a small committee of people who were standing for that town, and then they all came together, how many towns are in a county? A lot of towns in every county. That's a great large group of people, of the people, securing the rights of the people. That's the gist of constitutional homeland security. And if every county had their group of people that were well regulated and trained to secure the rights and the safety of the people, imagine the whole state under the being overseen by the sheriff in every county in the state. That's a powerful force to be reckoned with. That's a great plan. That's the way things should be. Maybe you would introduce that kind of an idea to your sheriff. If your sheriff has no testosterone, might not go over so well. But the idea is that, if you have a constitutionally minded sheriff, whether they're male or female is not as important, but the idea is that they understand that they have the power to secure your county for the rights of the people. That'd be great. One of the things, the organizations that are out there out in the area are these Restore America, coming up with these citizen governments, if you will. And so there are these private groups that think that they're going to implement a constitutional government. I'm not necessarily opposed to them in and of themselves, but they're powerless. If you're going to do that kind of work, the first thing you must do is secure your sheriff. You will not be able to implement any government unless you have the force to back it up. And without force, there is no securing of rights. All rights are secured by force if necessary, hence the Second Amendment. So the idea of that is that you want to be able to, if your sheriff was a constitutional sheriff, and if he could muster men and women together to secure the rights of the people, then that sheriff could call for, invite the county attorney or whatever, call for a citizen jury to hear a matter or a case, and invite them in and have them sit in on a grand jury to indict people. Who would you indict? How about politicians that don't uphold the Constitution? That would be an indictable offense. When was the last time a politician or a judge or anybody in government was indicted for not upholding their oath of office? Why the hell do we have an oath of office when there's no consequence for not upholding the oath of office? If I get into office, I was going to do a fun thing. I was going to submit a bill to abolish the oath of office. It's like, why would you do that? Everyone, it's a bad thing. I would agree. I wouldn't necessarily vote to abolish to abolish the oath of office. But the bottom line is this: if there's no consequence for not upholding the oath of office, what the hell do we have one for? If you can't sit down before any bill is going to be passed and determine whether it meets constitutional muster, that the Constitution of your state actually says that the government has the power to do a matter, if it isn't there, no sense in passing a bill. There are a lot of laws on the books that are unconstitutional, but until someone interrupts it and to uphold the Constitution, that's not going to happen. So both the sheriff and the fully informed jury can determine that a law will not be enforced, or a law will not be, well, enforced is the truth, nullified, if it's unjust or it doesn't secure the rights of the people. Look how powerful that area of of freedom, securing freedom, would be if we had constitutional sheriffs and if we had jury people that would check government. It would be a far more peaceful place. Might not have to carry your firearm because government's checked and is at bay. But that's work that has to be done. And so those are two areas that I think that every freedom organization should be a part of, creating those end runs to bad government. So that's, how we look at that. So anyway, that's what I wanted to share about the unification of the freedom movement in those areas, the fully informed jury and the constitutional sheriff. So if you have comments or questions that are on this video, we'll endeavor to follow up on them. If we're going to digress into another part of our particular broadcast tonight, this would be a great place to wrap up this video, is at the end of this. So stay on here. I just want to say thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time on Destination Freedom. All right, so yeah, we're still on. So be sure to like and subscribe. I should have said that beforehand there. Anyway, so they'll fix this all in wrapping up. I wanted to check some of the questions that we have that are a part of the Q&A. I'm going to just read over anything. Amma, did we have any questions about juries or about sheriffs?
On the yellow paper.
Okay.
Questions about juries.
Oh, about juries. Okay, cool. Thank you. One question was, is there any way to, is that guarantee? Guarantee to have a jury of your peers, meaning no 14th Amendment people. Well, one thing with that. Oh, wow, look, we get a, oh, cool, that question's coming up in the feed. That's cool. Did you do that? All right. Very good. Right. Sparky, thanks for your question. If I was being prosecuted in some capacity and we're convening a jury, in the jury selection, I would be bringing my certified documents. So I said, listen, I'm not a federal 14th Amendment citizen. I only can have a jury of my peers. That would have to be state citizens. That would be not federal citizens of the District of Columbia. So I would bring all my evidence showing who I am. And of course, I would, if someone's filing income taxes as a taxpayer, certainly wouldn't want them on my jury judging me, because if everybody is judging, they all file and pay, what's the chance, unless I have my jury, that they would ever rule in my favor? They have to pay taxes. Why shouldn't I? See, they'll always find you guilty unless you have a juror who won't do that. I remember when I was in Washington, I met the juror on this FedEx Pilots case or whatever it is. She was prayerful, and the jury was asking the judge for the law that required people to file and pay, something like that. And the judge said to the jury that he would give them the law, later on, that they would do that. So they waited. He never showed it. And so she got, upset that he promised, he didn't deliver the law. They didn't know what law that was written that said that they had an income tax liability. Of course, in our classes, I show you that law. It's the Constitution, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17. But anyway, and the 14th Amendment. But anyway, the judge in that case didn't. I remember her telling the story that she was in the court. She dreamt that light was coming out of the courtroom at the top, and she felt, or light was coming down, and some weird thing, but she determined that she couldn't prosecute because the judge failed to produce that, and so she acquitted. She was responsible for acquitting that person on an IRS case. That's the power of one juror. So that's exciting. So is there a guarantee? Listen, when dealing with the government, what guarantees you have? But that's what I would do in the jury selection, is declare your own, that you're not a 14th Amendment citizen. That's why we get certified copies of our passport file. that would be a great place to use that in court. And, um, and whether the judge would honor that or that would be up on an appeal, but I definitely would do that. You'd have to guarantee that. Can we upload the pamphlets you showed on the, yeah, that's cool. Thanks for that, Sparky. I'll make a note. We'll see if we can find a link. They sell these on eBay. I buy, yeah, the Citizens Rulebook, that's right. There's a number of organizations that can send this, because a lot of times the organization will actually they actually make a place where the organization can put their contact information here. So these are wonderful. And they give you a lot more information. I believe there's the Declaration of Independence is in here, as well as I think the U.S. Constitution's in here. And there's jury handbooks in there. So this is a great guide. And I have them somewhere in my stuff. I probably have 25, 50. I think I had a display, Independence Day display at the library. And so I had these on top. I was handing these out. And so that's always good. So you can go to eBay. But yes, we'll put a link on there for the Citizens Rule Book. That's a good one. I'll also put the link for Fully Informed Jury in the subject matter of this video. So let's see here. Let's look up some other questions with respect to state citizenship. It's a follow-up from last week. The question is, all the websites talk about the following U.S. or United States laws. When you agree to use service or PayPal, YouTube, are you agreeing? Yes, someone asked this last week. Yeah. Yeah, the thing is, like I say many times, anything corporate is going to have a terms and agreement. I guarantee you, they're going to favor themselves over you. Most of these things, these systems are for federal citizens and not state citizens. So if you don't want to use their thing, then of course you can say no, and then it'll shut down. You won't use it. But if you want to, you're going to say yes, regardless. Now, I have never given a social security number to YouTube. I've never received money from YouTube. No, let me say that's YouTube. I also want to say the same would go for eBay. I've never given anything to eBay, and although I've been paid through PayPal, I have never given a social security number to PayPal. They've asked me 3 different times. I've always given them my W-8 and W-9. So again, you can stay out of the federal zone with any of those things. Amma, in the future, I would like bullets for questions. I don't want to read a whole paragraph, okay? So that'll help next time here. So, question was IRA, 401k, how does one remove their IRA from 14 minutes? Listen, all... Okay, that's fine. The question is IRA and 401k, how does one remove their IRA from 14th Amendment U.S. citizenship? It seems like IRS will claim ownership of taxes because they were deferred taxes. That's one question. Will the IRS hold me responsible for a tax year if I get my passport status changed in half the year? Listen, here's the thing. Let me just answer to those questions. Every place, without exception, when you're asked for your social security number, typically it's tax related. We have forms for that for our clients. They may ask you, are you U.S. citizen? Many, credit cards, bank accounts, they ask, are you U.S. citizen, driver's license, voting, jury duty, are you U.S. citizen? Here's the social security number. Both those concepts are based upon the tax code as well as 14th Amendment citizenship management. So either you're going to say no to that in some capacity, which means you won't participate in whatever it is that they're doing, or you're going to say yes, but you're going to have an explanatory statement that explains that you're not a 14th Amendment citizen of your state. Your social security number is not yours, it's theirs. All these caveats, and we have all those caveats in our paperwork, so that the documents in the paper or whatever you're filling out is true and correct. And so whether it's a 401k, yes, when you set up your 401k, you fill out a W-9 improperly. Will the IRS pursue you? The idea is I'm making up about you. I don't know you. That no one came along and said, do you want to be a federal citizen subject to the jurisdiction of, or do you want to be a state citizen in which the federal government is bound by the Constitution and not violate you? Duh. Which one would you choose? So the idea is that no one ever gives you that choice. So there's a certain level of fraud or culpability on the behalf of the government for violating it in some capacity. But that's what we always do, is you tell the truth. You've never had an income tax liability. You've filled out bad paperwork and you've behaved like a federal citizen. So you're going to want to change that. And so, yes, at any time you can say, I want to change that. Now, some people have decided to close out a certain year, stop paying in first, and then they end it, they close it out nicely, and then they begin not having those communications or obligations with IRS. That's a very common thing. But it's no one's to decide but you. You're the only one that can decide when you want to begin that. Most of the time in this work, we begin the process with the passport process because we want to pull out of the federal zone, put it in the record that you're not a 14th Amendment federal citizen. How should someone get out of Social Security? There's two ways to participate in Social Security: paying in and receiving benefit. The best way to stop, participate in Social Security is stop giving them money. That's it. Just stop. Listen, no one is going to do this process. No one is going to take a tax stand while being employed. When you do these things, you're unemployable. You're going to have to give up the idea of having a job. Okay? No more jobs. Now you develop a business and you serve people. Okay? Now, if that blows you out of the water, you need to have your mind blown. How mind-blowing was Neo when he took the red pill and he woke and he's waking up in his pod? That's a bit mind-blowing. It's not that much. It's not that bad. And then all of a sudden, all the pot things are unplugging him. He's getting flushed because he woke up. Now he's going to drown. It's not that bad. It's just paperwork, right? Anyway, so he says, I've been a Puerto Rican resident up to 2020, 22, 23. I changed my address to Texas, but it's only officially become official resident. I don't know residents. You can reside all over. Habitation and domicile is what we're talking about. You cannot do this process if you're not a state citizen. State citizenship is based on habitation and domicile. So if your habitation domicile is Puerto Rico, you're in federal territory. You're not a state citizen. You can't vote in Puerto Rico. If you have habitation domicile in Texas, that means you have a Texas driver's license. You vote. You're on juries. That's your habitation domicile. You're a citizen of Texas. You can deal with that. So if once you're can't be a state citizen, not be in a state, I changed my blah blah blah. Changing your address. So we're not talking about changing your address, like it's a mailing thing. It's about habitation and domicile. So it's about that place you intend to return to. If you have a driver's license in a state, that's going to be your habitation and domicile, because in America, they only allow you to have a driver's license from one state. So it's not about residing. I reside in Florida in the winter. I have my habitation domicile in New Hampshire. I reside wherever I want to go for as long as I want to go. Don't reside in the District of Columbia. There's a certain amount of time you'll create a tax liability for yourself. There you go. I won't get into all those particulars. What I would recommend, Ken, with respect to all these questions, I recommend taking my state citizenship class. You're going to understand who has an income tax liability. And then there are other classes that we have to support in these different areas. We have alignment workshops that help people with this. You see, I really, because people listen to this broadcast are federal citizens. If I give out a lot of information of how to navigate and they don't change their citizenship, they're going to jail. I don't want that liability. We don't serve the general public. We don't serve um, federal citizens or resident aliens. So if you do these processes, when we'll give you information on how to navigate that, okay? Because federal citizens can't be claiming state citizenship while they're federal citizens. It's illegal. Okay, it's considered frivolous. Nathan says, uh, the question was, I wanted to see if you would, what advice I would give. I'm not handing out advice only to our clients. Okay, I might tell you what I may do. I just want to see what advice you would have regarding ATF Form 4473. Clients that clients have filled out in the past. I recognize the responsibility aspect of correcting paperwork. Well, right. So let's talk about federal gun laws. All right, who are they for? How are federal gun laws congruent with the Second Amendment? Well, federal gun laws are for federals, U.S. 14th Amendment citizens, and resident aliens, and of course in federal territory, D.C., Guam, Puerto Rico, and all that. So that's all where federal gun laws apply. So if you're going to fill out a federal form, gun form, then you're either going to have to answer it and be as a non-resident alien, not a U.S. citizen, or you'll fill it in as a U.S. citizen. You're going to have an explanatory statement explaining that you're not a 14th Amendment citizen of your state, very much like the 10-page explanatory statement that we have with the passport process, which is also for federal citizens, but we do it as a state citizen. So you might fill out the form as a state citizen, or my recommendation, don't buy guns from federal arms dealers. Buy them privately. Aragon Grant asked, my wife, didn't I see these questions before? My wife was not born in USA. I was not either. I've had a passport since I was 5 or 6 and a certificate of citizenship. Unfortunately, my lack of knowledge. So at 5 or 6, if you had a passport, then that means your parents naturalized or did that process in some capacity, one or both. I'm not sure what that situation would be. So you probably were born abroad to American parents if you qualify for a passport. So however that works out, we have clients that have done that kind of stuff. You're saying your wife has permanent resident card. Your wife has a permanent resident card in the District of Columbia. Okay, so your wife is a resident alien in the District of Columbia, Washington, D.C. And so no naturalization documents. So she didn't do a naturalization process facilitated by the federal government, which on that naturalization certificate would have your state. And a lot of times they become federal 14th Amendment citizens instead of citizens of their state. It's kind of like both, but most are ignorant that the state citizenship is enough. Can you help my wife obtain a non-citizen national passport? There's no such, well, let me say, your wife, unless she was born in America Samoa or Swains Island, she's not a non-citizen national. So there's going to be no passport for that for your wife. It says that the Secretary of State no longer issues certificates. The Secretary of State issues passport for non-citizen nationals, but you have to be born in America Samoa and Swains Island. So if you're not, then it's not going to happen. There's no such thing as non-citizenship. It's citizen national of the District of Columbia or the United States. Okay, so I don't know what non-citizenship is. A state citizen is a state citizen. It's not a non-citizen. Does that mean the FOIA on my wife says that there's no person? When you do the passport process, the FOIA, the Freedom of Information Act request, only shows the documents that you submitted in your passport process. There's nothing that the State Department's going to hand out and say, golly, thanks you got away from us. Oh, good for you. You're now there's none of that. Stop looking for your government to give you permission. You're asserting yourself as what is true under penalty of perjury. You're doing the process as a state citizen because that's what you believe, and you don't need anybody to say it's okay. Would my wife be able to get a passport without take? Nope. They're only going to give passport to someone who has a naturalization certificate or a birth certificate, and that could be a birth certificate from a consulate from being born abroad to American parents. But the federal government won't issue passport unless, of course, you naturalize in the state. We have half a dozen or more of clients that are interested in doing a naturalization in the state. So we're working on that um, where we are. So um, anyway, um, Agron, thanks so much for that question. Here's a question, getting a pass. So once a person naturalized, then they can get a passport. Then Rachel says, hello, I have further questions about after learning a bit more about the process. My husband and myself do not have passports currently, okay, and owe a considerable amount to the IRS. Are we able to get passports? IRS for their federal citizens determine that if you have more than $50,000 worth of owed to the IRS, and there's a lien or a levy, and there's also other elements in the law that says that have to happen before they'll send a certification to the Secretary of State to deny passport. If they've done that, then no, you will not be able to get a passport. You have to resolve your IRS issues first. We do have a couple clients that have resolved that. We're interested in helping clients overcome those matters with the IRS. And it says, if we are able, so anyway, so I answered that. So yeah, your issues, I don't know if the IRS has done all those things. If you're in a payment arrangement, maybe they haven't done lien or levy. If they haven't done lien or levy, then maybe you can get your passport. And then once you get your passport and you have your certified documents, that'll be great evidence to pursue IRS that you've never had an income tax liability. But we'll see. You have to see how that goes. Hey, Joe, glad to see you on here. Uh, we're working with your brother, and I'm very excited about that. I did have a message from you on the website, and I wanted to follow up with you. So you're on my list to follow up with. Thanks for being on tonight. Um, so you've taken the state citizenship class. That's cool. And he says here, hello, I purchased and watched the state citizenship class and never knew any of this. I'm literally in shock. And listen, I just did a presentation tonight, talked about this stuff. That's usually what happens. People are in shock. I'd like to begin to get out of the federal zone and become a state citizen, but I don't know where to begin. Anyway, he talks about he has an LLC in Rhode Island, and he has a real estate business. Look, it's all that. All that is there. So the idea of that is there's you. We want to secure you and pull you out of the federal zone from being a federal citizen and all that. And so I would recommend going to the DestinationFreedom.org website, sign up for the full passport process. When you go there, you can see my picture. I will upload a new picture tonight. I have one. It's going to be different than that microphone one. Michael, you should take a picture of me in front of the microphone here, right? Anyway, or we can just take a picture. We can take one of these. Yeah, it's all good. Anyway, so you can go to the website, and underneath the picture and video there's a line that says full passport process. So that'll be cool. You can be over here. And then you can sign up. There's a hold harmless agreement, and then there's a DS11 that you can download, fill those out, give those to us, make payment. We'll take PayPal, or we'll do crypto, gold or silver, cash, whatever you want to work on. All those options are there. Okay. So anyway, so those are all there. And so you can sign up. We'll be glad to take care of that and help you pull out of the federal zone if that's what you like to do. That'd be cool. But the class, you already took class, you see what those obligations are. Never had a passport, and you understand. You're talking about banking. If you have a bank account, then just keep it as it is, and you can give them your proper tax documents so that you can let them know. But I would just leave that there. If you have corporate bank accounts, you're going to shut all those down. I've never, says here, and I just sold a piece of property. Yep. Another thing in selling, yeah, property. I mean, you created capital gains for yourself. If you didn't have these obligations, you would be doing your property as a non-resident alien. And of course, a lot of times in these processes, the other party, the one that's buying the property, they're trying to figure out whether you're going to pay your tax or not. That's crazy. But they're going to make a determination. So you're going to need to understand the subject matter enough to assist them in making sure you're paid, and so that they're not going to violate you by sending money to IRS. We have a class of 1445, IRS 1445. IRS class deals with real estate transactions. You're after the fact, but you definitely would want to do that. And then if you're buying a piece of property, you're going to want to make sure that you're not buying a United States real property interest. And so therefore, you're going to want to submit documents to make sure that you're not buying the property as if you're a federal citizen. So anyway, there's a lot of support and help for you with that, and I appreciate your questions. And again, if you have more questions, you can come on and ask them here. Once you become a client, we have a night in which clients ask questions about the things they're doing, the things they're working on. We give you lots of support so we can help you do that stuff, and we're glad to do that. So, all right. Anyway, that's some of that. I'm glad to have you on tonight. Glad that you showed up. Be sure to like and subscribe. If there's anything we can do for you, just reach out to us at DestinationFreedom.org. If you want to email us, you can email us at statecitizen@DestinationFreedom.org. All right. Hey, tomorrow's Halloween, right? Now, the funny thing about Halloween, before I close out here, is usually we find some party to go to or something like that. That's a lot of fun. But what's more fun is usually on November the 5th. Remember the 5th of November, the gunpowder treason and plot. If you haven't seen V for Vendetta, go out and see the film V for Vendetta. But usually, not all the time, most November the 5th, I go out and I dress up as V, and I go out and I usually plan a freedom event locally, and I walk around, I talk to people, invite them into, securing their liberty and freedom. Most of the time I'm interacting with cops, because even though we just passed Halloween, it's scary to people to show up in a costume with your face covered. And I always enjoy that. And of course, I never carry any ID or anything like that. And I usually tell them I'm all set. But anyway, it's a real peaceful thing. We hand out information, and we want to make that. So we'll do that, and we'll have a freedom organization. We'll usually want to meet in some public place, and we'll have a nice time. So the amazing thing about that is election day. So that'll be fun. And so they'll think I'm trying to promote, one candidate over, but I'm not voting for anybody to go to the District of Columbia. I'm all done with that. I drained the swamp in my own life. And if you want to drain the swamp in your life, head on over to DestinationFreedom.org, and we'll help you do that. All right. Thanks for being on tonight. We'll see you next week, and that'll be fun. Hey, we'll probably be talking about, next week I was going to talk about we're going to have some testimonials, but I have a feeling we're going to be talking about the aftermath of yesterday. You know what I'm saying? I think that'll be a good idea. That'll be the following. Yeah, I think so. So we'll do a next week. We will do a what do they call that? Debrief. We will debrief the selection. All right. We'll see what happens around America. I have a feeling some people are not going to be very happy. We'll see what happens. All right. God bless you. We'll see you around. Take care. I'm Christopher Gronsky. This is Destination Freedom. We'll see you next time. Take care.